Hello fellow Misfortunates! Most of you probably know that Lethality Xayah has been completely dominating solo queue a few patches ago. This ultimately caused her to get hotfix nerfed and the hype around Lethality Xayah started to die down. What many people fail to realize, however, is that Lethality Xayah is still an extremely strong pick today, and actually one of the most reliable champions if you want to play ranked and get some free wins. Obviously, Xayah was completely broken pre-nerf, and it was definitely healthy for the game that Riot toned down her Q spell. Back in the day when it had a base cooldown of merely 4 seconds at rank 5, ability haste stacking was a little too effective on her, and she was basically pick or ban for every single solo queue lobby. A champion who is this highly contested in champ select is quite frankly not a reliable pick if you want to climb, because most of the time you won't even get to play them. Due to that, the nerfs which caused most people to abandon Xayah and look for the next flavor of the month were actually a godsend, because if you want to play Xayah every single game these days, you definitely can. And she still has all the tools necessary to enable you to carry your solo queue games from the ADC position. Well, you know, especially ADC players are notoriously complaining about their role and that they would have no agency in the game. They claim to always get one-shot killed, to not deal enough damage themselves, to get perma-ganked and dived in the bot lane, and that every game would be decided by factors beyond their control. But when you have a champion like Lethality Xayah at your command, all these issues are null and void. With this ability-based marksman, you can stand at 1000+ range and spam your Q and your E, which makes it incredibly hard for your enemies to punish you. Your items and runes are carefully selected to make these spells as powerful as possible, so you effectively never have to walk into auto-attack range. Post level 6, you also get access to Xayah's ultimate, which is one of the best disengage spells in the game. It makes you untargetable, which means you completely invalidate dive champions, and you also deal massive damage at the same time. Additionally, you have a lot of agency during the lane phase, since you can single-handedly beat your lane opponents by poking them with your spells. Most marksman champions rely on their support to do this, but Xayah can be very much proactive in lane with her QE combo. You might not be a late game hypercarry, but you are still a self-reliant threat to the enemy during the early, mid and late game, and most importantly for solo queue, you have your own CC and tools for self-peeling. Before I show you exactly how to carry your solo queue games with Lethality Xayah, I will first give you the optimal runes and items, because these are quite straightforward and already show you how Lethality Xayah works in theory. You go for Summon Eerie, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence and Scorch, with Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery secondary. Your shards are Attack Speed and Adaptive Force, and then Armor against the traditional ADC, or Magic Resist against the bot lane mage. Xayah is a full poke champion with a hit-and-run playstyle and has no way to trigger Eerie's shielding effect with any of her spells. Intuitively, you then might think that Arcane Comet would be better for Xayah, but there are two reasons why Summon Eerie is always the superior choice. First of all, Arcane Comet is dodgeable, and your Q, which would trigger it, does not CC its target in any way. Therefore, Comet will end up missing a little too often, resulting in lower damage overall. Secondly, Comet's cooldown and the cooldown of your Q are terribly out of sync at all stages of the game, which means Comet will not even trigger every time. Eerie on the other hand has no true cooldown, and she will always have returned to you by the time your next Q is ready to cast. So yeah, don't fall into the Comet trap and instead click the subscribe button and go for Eerie every single game. Mana Flow Band and Biscuits truly enable your spell-based playstyle, providing you with enough resources to never run out of fuel when you spam your abilities. On top of that, the bonus mana from these runes directly feeds into Manamune, which is one of your core items. Transcendence is quite important during mid and late game teamfights, granting you additional spell rotations with its extra ability haste and reset mechanic. AD carries typically should provide consistent damage over longer periods of time, and when you play an ability-based champion, you need enough haste to still be able to do your job. Scorch is crucial for extra lane pressure. The damage might not look like much, but when you spam your Q, it quickly adds up and can accumulate into a massive early game health advantage for you. Magical Footwear is simply one of the best minor runes for AD carries in the game, since the rune effectively accelerates your item build by 300 gold, and gold is a highly important resource for any marksman champion. Speaking of items, your first core item you have to rush every single game is Eclipse. The stat profile is great, it provides you with sustain, and most importantly, its passive damage triggers off your QE combo, adding even more burst and safety to your trading pattern. Unfortunately, it does not come with any additional ability haste, but this is where your next items come into play. You upgrade your magical boots to lucidity boots and complete your Manamune. Quick side note, you naturally want to start stacking your Manamune as early as possible, so make sure you buy Tear of the Goddess on your first base when you are still working towards Eclipse. The amount of raw attack damage on Manamune is really crazy, and Xayah has very strong AD ratios on her spells, so this is a huge benefit. Additionally, the on-spell damage on Manamune is much higher than its on-hit damage, which means an ability-based AD carry naturally gets a lot of value out of this item. And yeah, the item also grants you a huge mana pool to work with, so you are definitely set for the rest of the game. You complete your core build with Cyrilda's Grudge, whose armor penetration is highly valuable, but most importantly the item provides even more ability haste. On top of that, your Q now slows your target, which means it is very easy to then walk up for an extra auto attack to unlock your Triple Feather Blade Caller for a free snare. These 3 items are absolutely mandatory every single game, but the items you get afterwards are more flexible. Yes, I somewhat ironically call this a Lethality Xayah build, despite the fact Eclipse is your only true lethality item so far. However, lethality is extremely strong in combination with percent armor penetration, so feel free to buy more lethality items here for perfect synergy with your Last Whisper item and Eclipse. I recommend Youmuu's Ghostblade and Axiom Arc if you need more damage, because these items provide you with all the stats you could possibly need: lethality, attack damage, and most importantly, ability haste. However, other lethality items like Edge of Night or Serpent's Fang can also be very strong. They might not have any ability haste on them, but their unique passives are invaluable in the right matchups. In some games, however, you will need more defensive items to counter fed enemies, so Morphle Mortius and Guardian Angel can also be competitive choices for you. In this Grandmaster solo queue game, Xayah starts the match with a longsword and 3 health potions. You could also start with Doran's Blade for better all-ins, but longsword with potions provides you with more sustain, which is better for a poke champion like Xayah. After all, your game plan is to win the war of attrition and avoid all-in fights. Unless they are completely free, of course, and your opponents are terribly out of position. Against the Leona Kai'Sa lane, however, you need to be careful with that. All-in fights is what Leona excels in, and Lulu Xayah cannot really match her power here. You have the range advantage though, so make use of it and be careful not to get baited. Anyway, you can play it safe yourself of course, but when your lane partner is careless and gives your opponents a free opening, you will have to fight regardless. The enemy Kai'Sa makes a mistake here however and tunnel visions onto the stunned Lulu, which makes her an easy target for you. Lulu is the center of attention, so it is actually 100% safe for you to walk up and use your short-ranged auto attacks to get additional feathers down. If given the time to do that, Xayah's all-in damage is actually very strong because Blade Caller scales with all available feathers without any diminishing returns. Another strength of the champion I have not yet talked about is her amazing wave clear. Thanks to the extra mana from your runes, you can easily shove the wave into the tower after this fight, creating a huge CS advantage for yourself. Okay, so what happens if you are overextended and end up getting caught? Xayah is somewhat weak when enemies are running away from you because they are then also walking away from your feathers, which are stationary on the ground. When the enemy engages, however, the opposite is true. They are directly running into your feathers, giving you a lot of damage. To connect with as many feathers as possible, you can even use your flash for a better angle. Again, you focus the enemy Kai'Sa and ignore Leona, since Kai'Sa is where the opponent's damage is coming from. This, in combination with Lulu's help, allows you to stay alive long enough to take her down, and then clean up the fight against a solo Leona who is quite harmless when by herself. And all of this is pre-level 6, mind you. Once you unlock your ultimate, you are effectively ungankable. Lee Sin tries to 3-man you with his bot lane, but you simply dodge his flash kick setup by pressing a single button. Also, remember when I said you are even stronger when people actively run into your feathers? Yeah, with your ultimate you don't even have to auto-attack to get them out. By the time Lee Sin actually gets to play again, your backup is there and he is severely weakened. With Lulu's ultimate you can even keep walking forward and stay in the middle of the fight. Had you had another support here who is not that good at keeping their ADC alive, you simply walk backwards and are completely fine either way. After this fight, Xayah is able to take down the enemy tower and thereby conclude the lane phase. Now you and your support can rotate towards the mid lane, which allows you to stay quite safe while simultaneously getting valuable damage on the ever so important mid lane tower. When this tower falls, but you get to keep your own, the enemy loses a lot of vision control. Contesting dragons and barons under these circumstances is extremely risky for the opponent, since the center of the map is now just dark for them. Your standard macro play that allows you to abuse this advantage as hard as possible is, of course, push past river, roam. Maximum gold, experience and vision for you, almost nothing for the enemy. Despite their vision disadvantage, red team tries to make a play in the jungle here. Blue team can react instantly though, which means their enemies are just horribly out of position and have to take a very sketchy fight. Of course, the League player instinct kicks in and red team fires everything they have against the AD carry. But you are playing Xayah. It doesn't matter what they try to do. You simply press your nope button and watch the enemy suffer even more, who just fully committed onto a now untargetable champion. After the dust has settled, you can simply auto-attack and then finish them off with your spells. Most other AD carries would have died instantly in this teamfight, but with Xayah you actually get to play the game. No need to hide until the fight is over, since you can in fact participate like any other champion. However, by no means do you have to exclusively use your ultimate for defensive purposes. Its base damage and AD scalings are actually quite high, and with your armor penetration from your items, you can also use this spell to reliably execute low health targets. Once you have numbers advantage, chances are you won't need it for its stasis effect anyway. Yet you should still be a little cautious whenever your ult is on cooldown. Without it being ready, you have to position more like a traditional AD carry, since your health and resistances are not really too impressive. Whenever you win a fight, you naturally want to take an objective for free afterwards, and now with an advantage of 2 mid lane towers, the entire jungle belongs to you. Blue team starts Baron soon after, since it is almost impossible for red team to contest at this point. Red team still contests, but they cannot do so in a coordinated way because they simply lack vision. After Kassadin gets killed, they now even have numbers disadvantage. Blue team pays with a lot of health though, and ultimately has to retreat from Baron. This is already more than what red team could have hoped for, but instead of retreating themselves, they actively engage without their mid laner. Admittedly, this fight was quite close, but blue team still comes out ahead with a few extra kills under their belts. While starting Baron and then getting engaged on is always risky, an even fight near the Dragon Pit is, of course, a completely different beast. All of blue team are full health, and with no way to take the AD carry out of the fight, red team simply has no chance here. Dragon falls after red team is forced to back off, but they still end up trying to challenge blue team as they rotate towards Baron again. This cannot and did not work out for red team here, and after this disaster they just keep falling like dominoes. However, truth be told, they were able to at least postpone blue team's Baron once more. Not that it ultimately matters, because after resetting, blue team tries to cash in their gold and vision advantage by relentlessly going for Baron again. But they don't want to fully commit without getting numbers advantage first. This play is merely a bait for red team. Blue team's goal here is to provoke red team to make a move near Baron so they can get a pick on them. But these back and forth siege strategies are just perfect for Xayah, since you will hit someone with your long range spells eventually, creating a valuable health advantage. This short time frame in which the enemy has to heal in the fountain is enough for blue team to destroy the first inhibitor. Oh, and look at this. Lee Sin thinks he can get a fancy outplay on Xayah to bring his team back into the game, but what is a bruiser assassin supposed to do against an untargetable champion? Now red team is chunked down even more, and they also lost an ally to Xayah's burst damage. With numbers disadvantage again, they can't do anything but watch as blue team attacks their towers. The following fight is just a last-ditch effort, and red team has no real chance here. Just a beautiful showcase of how to safely carry your team to victory with Lethality Xayah. If you want to learn about another champion with a lot of utility, safety and playmaking potential, I got you covered with First Strike Senna. You can access a full guide and discover Senna's new sleeper OP item build by clicking the link on your screen right there.